As you're looking through the internet, seeing everyone else catching fish, it's easy to ask, what baits are they using? What lakes are they at? And what secrets do they have? The real secret to fishing is understanding the fish, becoming confident in tactics, and knowing where to find them. On this episode of Secrets to Fishing, Peter steps through the basics of fishing with tip-ups. Next, he travels to Western Lake Sakakawea with Missouri Secret's Tackle Pro staff and tournament anglers Lucus, Bruns, and Andrew Keller for an early morning walleye adventure to discuss how to find a new location to fish and how to choose the right tactic once you have found a good spot. This episode is presented by ShopMissouriSecrets.com and North Country Marine and Motorsports. This week's Simple Trick is brought to you by American Legion Victor B. Wallin Post 12.
If you're old like my dad, you had to keep a written journal of how you caught your fish, when you caught your fish, and where you caught your fish. But now, we have these. And nowadays, all we have to do is take a picture of where we caught the fish, and the timestamp will tell us when we caught it. And now, take a picture of the lure in the mouth so you don't forget what you caught it on. I like this way of journaling because it's easy and I have all sorts of proof that I catch bigger fish than my brothers.
Tip Up Basics is brought to you by ShopMissouriSecrets.com.
A lot of people see these guys sitting on the shelf at their bait shops or local convenience store and just wonder, what are they and how do you even fish them? Well, we're going to go through the basics of fishing a tip up and how you can effectively fish them on the ice. Now, when it comes to actual styles of tip-ups, there's really two main styles. The first one is tip-ups that have the line and the spool underneath the ice. And just like this one, it doesn't matter if it's a really big cylinder-shaped one or one that actually covers the hole. And they could come in a couple different styles, like this, just a bit smaller one, or this really heavy-duty plastic one that we use for pike. The other style that we like to use, and specifically when it's windy out or there's a pretty strong breeze, are wind tip-ups like this HT wind tip-up. Now what these ones do is they actually have the spool above the ice and on top of the tip-up. Now the basic parts of a tip-up like this are, your first is the spool where your line goes. Second is the shaft. Now the top here, you'll see the spinny part. That is actually connected to the spool, so when a fish bites, it's going to trip. The third part, which is your flag. So in all, when a fish bites, it's just going to do a simple action just like that. So it's nothing complicated or really hard to understand. It's just getting used to actually fishing with them and having them in your spread. Now, a side note with these tip-ups is the second part here in the shaft is they're full of grease, and what that's going to do is just keep it from freezing up. So how do you actually set these up? Well, it's pretty simple. What we're going to do is I'm going to clip on a lead depth finder just like this onto the hook and then let it down. So once you've got your lead weight that is on the bottom, what you're going to do now is take your fingers and just pinch the line where it's on the surface of the water, and that's going to be your mark for the actual bottom. Now what you're going to do is, if you want your bait to say be 6 inches off the bottom, take the bottom of the water mark, put it on the top of the tip up, and that's going to be roughly 6 inches below the spool. Now this mark is where your bait's going to actually be off the bottom, and now you can put your marker so you can get back there once you catch a fish. What we like to do for walleyes is just take a split shot, clip it on the line, and that's our line marker to know where to place our bait once we get a fish and need to go back down. Now we're going to pull up our line and get bait on, catch fish. All right, so now I'm back at that mark. So any excess line that's laying on the ice, I'm just going to reel back onto the spool to this little line guide here. Now the other thing about tip ups is with this pin up here where you place your flag, it's got two different size holes where you can put the flag. Now for us generally, we put it on the smaller slot because that gives less resistance for the fish to pull on. But the bigger slot we'll typically use when we're fishing for big pike on our big pike tip ups. Now with these wind tip ups, what we typically like to do is fish them with jigs like this water puppet. And the way you set them up is you let the spool here loose enough so you can let the line all the way to the bottom. And then once you get to the bottom with your jig, just simply reel up the spool just 2 or 3 times. And then set the flag, and I'll show you that here in a second. Okay, we're on the bottom now. I'm just going to reel up a couple times. And then to set the flag, you simply just tuck it on the back side of the spool. Now, one important thing is always have a handful of slush on the back end of the tip up so it doesn't tip over. Now, you can't just position this tip up in any way you want. You got to position them so the wind hits the back side of this plate, because what it's doing is jigging the tip up. That's why we like to use jigs like water puppets on here. And depending on what you're fishing for, like pike or walleyes, you can adjust the tension on this spring with this wing nut. So if you want a lot of give, you can lift up this little plate here and tighten it down. And it always comes with 2 springs, so you can adjust how much force. Now, the way we actually rig up our tip ups is, depending on the species of fish we're going after, is 20 to 60 pound braided line for the main line, and then that goes to a ball bearing snap swivel. So depending on if we want to have a jig or say an eye candy out, we can easily switch up to a different presentation. Now, ball bearing swivels can get pretty expensive, but if you don't have a really good swivel, when that minnow is swimming around, spinning in circles throughout the center of the hole, it's going to create line twist if you don't have a good swivel. And when that minnow decides to stop swimming and it's spinning in a circle like this, you're not going to catch very many fish because it just doesn't look natural. Along with that, we can also change up colors really, really quickly. So like I'm using a very bright pink tungsten jig. So if I start getting bit on this, we can switch up to a pink jig on the tip up or a pink eye candy. What you're seeing here right now is you got the person who's actually bringing the fish in, and what I'm doing is simply stripping the line further back so it doesn't get tangled up. Because if you just pile the line on right next to the hole, it's going to get to a huge mess and you're going to spend more time untangling than catching fish. The one thing that makes our lives a whole lot easier is using tackle buddies like this. And whether they're the small ones or the big ones like this, we got a whole bunch of our rigs ready to go, like these jigs on leaders. So he just got bit off. All we have to do is take one off the tackle buddy and he can clip it right on and get back to fishing right away. And now that we got that line marker, it's just as simple as going back to that split shot. Now when people put out tip ups on the ice, a lot of people just throw them out and hope that a fish will bite. Now your odds of actually catching fish are going to go up way more if you have a strategic pattern like we're doing today. Now the 3 ways we like to put our tip ups out is, first, like now, is the parallel pattern. And it can be 1 line or 2 lines all the way up to 4 or 5 depending on how many people you actually have on the ice. And that's simply just a number of parallel lines with the tip ups every few holes, and then like today we got people jigging in between. That far tip up is in about 10 feet of water, and then now this tip up closest to us, about 22, 23 feet of water. So you can cover a big strip of water with this spread. Now for fishing spots like this creek on the other side of this section of water here, the pattern we're going to typically use is called the diamond pattern, and literally it's the shape of a diamond. And what this does is allows us to put 2 lines on the top sides of the creek and then down in the middle of a channel. And if you want to add more lines, you just simply add more diamonds in key locations to spread yourself out. Now the final pattern that we utilize, and we typically use a lot, especially early ice, is the S or contour pattern. And where we use this is on a specific contour or piece of structure like weed line. You just place your baits on the outside, on top, or on the inside of said structure. So now that we've got all these tip-ups spread out and are in the ice fishing, every hole that there isn't a tip-up, you know, the people who are out here, we're going to jig through very aggressively. Presentations that we like to use are rattling spoons, very aggressive jigs, bright colors, anything loud to draw these fish in. So the next time you're on the ice, think about using your tip-ups to cover more water, effectively find the fish, and to catch more fish.
Everybody's been asking what Peter's going to do now that he's done with high school. Well, let me tell you about Sakakawea State University, the official educational choice of Secrets to Fishing TV.
How old do you have to be to go to Sakakawea State University?
Well, Cohen, I started when I was 5, and at Sakakawea State University, a lot of people have learned what it takes to stay in schools.
I learned patience and to always stay humble at Sakakawea State University.
Wait, did somebody say Sakakawea State University? Most important thing, stay in schools.
I've earned money because I learned to stay in schools.
We wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't stayed in school.
What do I have to do to stay in schools?
All you gotta do is go to Sakakawea State University Facebook page and learn all sorts of fish facts and then go fishing.
Hi, Peter. Hey, I wish I went to Sakakawea State University.
I wish my kid would have picked Sakakawea State University.
Sakakawea State University, the official Fish Facts Facebook page and clothing line of Secrets to Fishing TV.
I invented Sakakawea State University.
This ice fishing experience is brought to you by Brewer-Agre Outdoors.
Well, we're on one heck of a bite here on Lake Sakakawea. We're out with Lucas, pro staff with Missouri Secrets Tackle, and a whole bunch of his friends. And today we're on one of those really fun bites where, you know, in the first half hour, we've got full limits of fish. And, you know, Lucas, we want to look at how did you guys pick out a spot like this, and what was your mindset when you found it?
How I found this spot is I got on my lake map and just started following the shorelines down and looking, like I said, looking for those steep contours, looking for areas that looked like there might be a transition. And you just, I mean, going out fishing them is honestly one of the greatest ways to find it is just looking at the structure. I mean, there is tons and tons of it on this lake. I mean, it's a reservoir.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we're on one of the spots where, you know, the river, the Missouri River starts to get wide, you know, and then it dumps into the reservoir of Sakakawea. So, you know, there's a lot of these breaks, you know, along the bends and the corners of the river, and, you know, finding that, you know, one rock, you know, either a big boulder or a rock pile or a couple trees, you know, that's the key spot. That finding that, you'll find the fish.
This spot in particular is, we got all the main drainage that comes out of these hills behind us funnel in right here. So it's kind of like another little creek channel that dumps into the other channel. And I mean, it works out. It just so happened to be one of those spots that works out good, and we were able to get on some good bites here years past, and it's continued to hold for us.
You know, it's those little details that can make a fishing trip a huge success. You know, we're on where the river gets wide and dumps into Sakakawea, but like you just said, you know, this is one of the spots where spring runoff, you know, occurs. So just that extra bit of current coming from the shore and not a current break, you know, even though you're on a river, that can be a huge factor in finding fish.
The main channel does cut in here, and these fish are literally from that channel that comes off of mainland, it comes in and it hooks hard, so that does actually help with that current break. But I mean, we've had current here before, tough current, and then we have times where it's not. But I mean, they're just really finding that steep bank, it seems like, because you can feel it sometimes just blowing right over the top of the bank. You know, you drop your lure down, and once you get so deep, then you straighten out. But
So Lucas, in like this particular spot per se, how much current is there actually moving through under the ice?
I mean, it varies year to year. We've had it before where trying to drop down a flutter spoon, you can't even keep it on your graph, and you have to size up, you know, get something where you can see. But we've also had it before where you could use a spoon here. I mean, it really just depends on how much precipitation we get in the fall, how much they're letting out of Fort Peck, and what's coming down the Yellowstone River really is what matters in that aspect. And I mean, we're in a pretty dry year this year, so this year's been really a mild current as far as, I mean, another difference too is how much water they're letting out of the Garrison Dam.
Yeah.
How much is pulling that way. So it just really, there's a lot of variable factors on how much current you're actually going to see in these spots.
So Lucas, on this spot we're at, you know, we've been catching a ton of fish, and, you know, knowing that this is a key spot where there's a drainage, what's it actually like under the ice, you know, because, you know, you look on the shoreline that's above the ice is complete sand and rocks. So, you know, is it a rock pile that we're on, or is it just sand?
We're sitting right on a transition of smaller gravel rock type deal, and then once I mean, further up here, once you get further up the ledge, it turns to sand, and it is just a big sand flat. And I mean, these fish are here chasing bait, pushing them up. And yeah, these fish chasing this bait up here, you know, your first hour of the day, your last hour of the day. And I mean, you have your fish that come through during the day too, but your prime times is them pushing them bait fish up out of this deeper water, pushing them up on these flats and up these ledges, because it's a place for them to kind of pinpoint them to attack, and it's a good feeding spot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's your first 2 hours. Okay. You know, your 2 main hours, I guess, for walleyes, your first hour in the morning and your last hour of the afternoon. But these reservoir fish, they're hungry. They're willing to eat all day if they gotta.
So with all these, you know, resources out here, Lucas, you know, you got your phone, you got your actual units, you can look for contours and, you know, and expect what the map says to be true. You know, that's not really the case. You know, take some time on the water and actually looking at a spot to figure it out.
Time on the water's huge. I mean, in the summertime, fishing, you're looking around and you come over something and you're like, hey, that might be a good ice spot, hit a waypoint. I mean, I've had my ups and I had my downs. I mean, I fished a lot of spots that I thought would be really good spots, and then you come to them multiple times throughout the winter and you don't, it seems like the fish never show up there. And then I've also had it where, you know, you go to a spot that you looked at that you thought was a real winner, and it was a real winner. It's along with that, putting all that time in for, I mean, doing your research and that time you put in on the water. I mean, that's how you find spots like this. I mean, we got a 6-man limit in an hour today. That you can't complain about that at all.
No, not at all.
That's a pretty epic bite.
Yeah. Here we go. I had no idea he was on. Yeah, that's what's... Let's get this guy in. Oh, it's a nice walleye. Too bad we can't keep anymore. That's a good eater.
Yeah, good eating fish right there.
Well, Lucas, it's been an absolute blast being on the ice with you guys. You know, can't wait to get out on the ice and in the boat with you over the summer. And thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for having us.
Today's Secret is brought to you by Eskimo. We have the tools.
One of the keys to catching fish on the ice is knowing how your above ice actions affect the fish down below. It wasn't until we started using our underwater camera that we figured out that using a headlamp is like using a giant spotlight under the ice. When we started keeping track, sometimes people with headlamps caught more fish and sometimes they caught less fish. That's why we switched to small LED lanterns that we set on top of sleds in 5-gallon pails. So pay attention to what you do above the ice and how it affects the fish.
This underwater learning experience is brought to you by Sakakawea State University. Stay in schools.
So Andrew, we're up here on the river section of Lake Sakakawea, and we're on a kind of a big sand flat, but also a bend where these fish are really stacked up. So what are we doing today to actually get these fish to bite?
We're just, this morning we just hopped around, hole to hole until we found the depth they wanted to be in, and now the sun's up and clear skies, we had to push out a little bit, but yeah, just jigging spoons, jigging wraps, anything like that. You've been using a tungsten, catching a few, and some plastic, I think, too.
Yep.
So the big thing, I think, is just being able to get down fast, too. A lot of times today we've had 2, 3, 4 fish on the screen, so getting the first one is great. You get back down there and get that second one, just a bonus. So.
Yep. Like this morning, everything was just hot and heavy, Andrew. And, now it's getting a little bit later in the morning. So what are the things we got to do to transition into a slower bite here?
A lot of things I like to do is, like, we're running this dead stick right next to where we're jigging here. Sometimes, like this morning, didn't matter. They were jigs, dead sticks. They didn't really care. But now you might get that one fish that comes in that he doesn't really want to chase you anymore. But the dead stick's a great option for him, too. So keeping that close by, you kind of attract them in with your jig and then get them on the dead stick if they don't want to commit.
Yeah, one thing that's been crazy is just the amount of fish that we were getting on the graph this morning. Like you said, having something a little bit heavier to get down to those fish to pick off maybe a second or even a third one like we were getting.
Yeah.
What is does color tend to matter a lot on these kinds of bites?
I don't think it matters too much. Like on a day like today, no. I like to use a lot of greens and UVs and stuff like that, but I guess I haven't really seen where I got to switch color just to get bit most days. So a lot of times I think it's profile and just the action of the lure too. So like this morning, Peter, we were getting fish. Sometimes they'd even come in a foot off the bottom and we get them to chase.
Yep, like that one right there.
Let me grab your deucer for you.
Yep. Yeah, that one, like you just said, I got him a foot or two off the bottom,
A lot of times that's all it takes.
Yeah. A little bit better, don't they?
Yeah, nice leader.
Awesome.
Here you are.
Sweet. Yeah, we've been catching a lot of fish just like this. They're perfect eater size between 15, 20 inches. This came on a UV pink tungsten, so it's a little bit of a mix of the UV and big bright colors.
Right, and a little bit of a downsize from what was happening this morning too.
Yep. So that's a nice fish.
Got one down there now too. See if he'll.
If we could keep them, we would. We put a lot of fish on the ice early this morning. You know, so we were on a good hot bite. Now we're just out here having fun catching fish.
Right, and a lot of times it seems like that magic hour. You can make them chase you. You said you had some coming up 8-10 feet off the bottom. Now today, later on the day like this with clear skies, I think you got to not pull it away from quite as fast and just give them a chance to eat it too.
Yeah, what was really interesting is, we were out here, a lot of us are using minnows, just a good solid, obvious bait choice to get these fish to bite, but these fish were so aggressive when we first got here. I was using, 3-inch Ned worms that I use for smallmouth bass, tubes, so being able to experiment on a good bite like this is always a ton of fun. It's just one of my favorite ways to catch fish too, is trying something new that you don't normally use.
Yeah, right, and you get to gain confidence in a new bait, and you never know, that could be your new favorite one going forward.
Yeah. So Andrew, when we're out here, we've got all these different baits, different color sizes, shapes going out. And a lot of people are saying you got to jig either really subtle or you get a lot of action going. So when's that time you should know to maybe switch up your presentation of your bait?
I think a lot of it for me is I just watch my electronics, and if I'm getting, if this morning I was getting bit every fish that I marked or every other or so, and once you start getting 2 or 3 in a row that turned you down, it's always nice to switch up. I always keep another rod handy just to give something else to offer them. So a lot of it, you just have to go off the mood of the fish, and it, just like for jigging too, not so much for lure, just for like your jigging action, you might pull it away a couple feet off the bottom.
Yeah, I got one
on you
too. Oh,
you might be just, a lot of times I'll like to have them just chase as high as they'll go, until they bite. But sometimes you'll pull it away from that next fish and he'll just stop, you know, put it off the bottom, and then you kind of just got to make a mental note.
Is there a point where you can get too aggressive with your jigging?
I think with the spoons and like the jigging wraps we're using now, I don't really think so. I think if you have a big rattle bait or something like that, if you're really ripping it hard, you can, they may come a couple feet away and you're not marking them quite yet, and then if you're really ripping it, you could spook them a little bit, depending on their mood. But with the baits that we're using now, I really don't think, as far as just to attract them, I don't think you can really jig it too hard. So.
Yeah, traditionally when I'm out on the ice and, got family on the ice, especially, with all the tip-ups and dead sticks and like bobbers we've got down under the ice, we've got, either a minnow on a bear hook, roaming free, or we've got them on a jig, so they got, just a bit subtle movement in a confined area. When you're out here putting dead sticks out, what are the options you go to for those?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Like the eye candy rigs that you guys make work really well. And I usually just spread it out. We're allowed 4 lines here. Got one coming up.
Yeah, I got
allowed 4 lines here, so you can kind of mix and match and experiment a little bit. And you just got to follow what the fish want that given day. So, but yeah, between that eye candy rig and just a jig that'll hold them right in place so they can't roam around. Sometimes they're not as aggressive. That works a lot better.
Yeah, because fairly recently we were on the ice with the family, and the biggest walleye, the sister caught, it was on a bare hook rig. The minnow had 4 feet to swim around from the center of the hole. So there's a lot of movement there. And then you have to go, even the same day within the next hour, switching up to a jig. So there's a subtle movement in a confined area. So.
Yeah, it just kind of goes back to just paying attention to either your electronics like here, or if you get one rod that's getting bit more than the other, to give them what they want.
Let's see what we got here. Oh, this is a nice fish. This is a really nice fish.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
That's a good way to end the day.
That's a good way to end the day, absolutely. Andrew, it's been a blast being on the ice with you, and we cannot wait to get on the water with you once again. When you guys take the time to understand just the little details, whether it's changing drastically or even changing just a little, you're going to catch a lot more fish. Let's get this guy back and catch some more.
This week's Leaving Ripples is brought to you by MPR Models.
When you start off with good intentions, you're going to have no reason at all to keep your word, and you're going to leave people hanging. But when you make a promise, your integrity will hold you to your word, and lives will be changed. Keeping your word is what it takes to show other people how to leave ripples.
Thank you to these great partners for making Secrets to Fishing possible.